When we rode the new 390 Duke a couple of months ago, I told you that it was the most exciting new Indian motorcycle that I had ridden in 2023, and I still stand by that statement. As for this new Duke 250, well, this is the biggest surprise of the year when it comes to new motorcycles. Now here's why that is. The original KTM 250 Duke Adventure, they were the most dull and uninspiring of all the KTMs. When you compare them to the rest of the lineup, they were pretty meh. Not anymore. Now this motorcycle is based on the new 390, as you can see from the looks, and let me tell you that the chassis, the subframe, the swing arm, it's all the same as well. The big difference here is the engine, so that's where we're going to start today. This, KTM tells us, is a brand new motor. Bore and stroke figures are the same as the outgoing engine, but from the outside, it looks very much like the new 390 motor, and it feels quite different. There are many attributes here that are similar to the new 390 Duke. It has good tractability at the low end, but where things have improved is that this engine is now a whole lot more exciting. Once the revs start to build, there is an exciting surge all the way to the red line, and this engine pulls hard. Now we managed to put this bike through our full road test cycle, and in our performance tests, it clocked a sub 8 second 0 to 100 time. That makes it the quickest single-cylinder 250cc bike that we've ever tested, and it brings it quite close to the 310s from BMW and TVS and the CB300R. It's not quite as quick as those bikes, particularly in the roll-on performance, but it's quick and it's fun. In fact, the biggest change to the old 250 for me is that this engine now has a hooligan nature. It's more what you would expect from a KTM. But the key difference between this and the new Gen 390 Duke is that this engine is fun, but it doesn't really have a potentially vicious side. The 390 is a really rapid motorcycle, and if you don't respect it, it can get you in trouble, even if you're an experienced rider. Now, let's talk about the potential downsides here. Like most KTMs, this bike has a fairly clunky gearbox. It's not extremely precise. It sometimes thuds into gear. While the gearbox isn't great, what's nice is that the 250 Duke now gets a quick shifter. It's a bi-directional unit borrowed from the new 390, and like the 390, it actually works quite well above 4000 RPM. Nice smooth up and down shifts at high RPM, full load on the throttle. But if you try using it in the city at low revs, particularly on upshifts, it can get a little clunky. The other downside that some people may not like is that this is not a particularly smooth engine. KTMs never are, but the vibrations here are such that you'll notice them, but they don't get too bothersome. And I've thought about this, and the reason it feels that way to me is that the vibrations aren't consistent in one particular area at one particular rev. At low RPMs, you'll feel them in the handlebar. At high revs, you'll feel them in the seat. Sometimes you'll feel them in the foot peg, but they're never consistently in one place, so you don't really end up with numb hands or numb toes. It's something that's there in the background. It's not a very high frequency vibration. If you like a really refined engine, you probably won't like this, but if you like a fun, sporty thing, you'll be willing to put up with the vibrations. Now let's talk about the comfort factor. Like I said, this motorcycle is based on the new 390 Duke platform, and that brings many benefits. The first benefit is that it's a lighter motorcycle. It's 8 kilos less than the old 250 Duke and 5 kilos lighter than the latest 390. The new chassis also brings in other benefits. This side-slung monoshock enables a larger airbox and a lower seat. It's now 800 mm, which is a good deal shorter than the old bike. Now, to give you an idea of what that is like for the average rider, I'm going to call Harshad our videographer, and Harshad is about 5 feet 8 inches tall. He rides a KTM 250 Adventure, and on that bike, he's on his tiptoes. But here, flat feet, both legs, yep, Harshad is very comfortable. So the reduction in weight and the lower seat definitely makes this a more accessible bike, but there are some downsides if you're a bigger rider. For example, this motorcycle definitely isn't as roomy as it used to be. Forward and back, I have just enough space. It's not cramped, but it's not really spacious either. In terms of my knees, there is enough room, nothing to foul with here, but the seat to foot peg ratio is quite tight. A lot of tall people I've spoken to do find this motorcycle cramped in this aspect. It's not horribly uncomfortable, but it's not comfortable either. Now, KTM will sell you an accessory seat that brings it up to about 820 mm, and if you're a bigger rider, I think that will make a good difference. Speaking of the seat, this is a KTM. It's hard, it's flat, it's not really that comfortable, and you will have to get used to it. That's what it's like to sit on the motorcycle, but in terms of suspension comfort, things are quite good. The suspension finds a nice zone. It is a little on the firm end, but not harsh. It deals with bad roads fairly well. But when you compare to the new 390 Duke, it's not as composed and the damping doesn't feel as refined. The difference here is that this suspension is not adjustable for damping. It's only pre-load adjustable at the rear. Now, in most situations, the suspension is really quite all right. But when you start pushing this bike hard, which it eggs you to do, especially through a set of corners, you will feel like the suspension is a little bit on the soft end. And unlike the 390 Duke, there's not a lot you can do about that. These are the new gen MRF steel brace tires. They're quite nice. We haven't really ridden them in the wet, but on the road, in the dry, even on the track, they're quite decent. As for the brakes, it's the same rotor sizes as the 390, so you get a 320mm disc up front and a 240mm disc at the rear, which is a little larger than the old 250. Braking performance is actually quite nice. There's really not much to complain about. If you want more performance, you can add in the 390 Duke sintered pads, because this bike comes with organic brake pads. Handling, grip, braking, these are all the elements of fast, fun and aggressive riding. But most 250 Dukes are going to spend a majority of their time in the city, and I think this bike does well there too. The improvements such as the lower weight, the lower seat height are all nice in the city. The handlebar is also a little wider than before, but it's not too wide and you'll be able to get through gaps just fine. Then there's the clutch, really not too heavy. There's a new curved radiator which does a good job with heat management. You won't really find any hot air blasts coming onto your legs. But we are in the middle of October heat in Mumbai, and if you get stuck in a bad jam, you will feel some heat, particularly on the right side for some reason. Maybe it's because of the exhaust pipe. It's there, but it's really not too bad. As for life out on the highway, this motorcycle now gets a 15-litre tank, which is bigger than before, so you've got a better range. We tested the motorcycle for fuel efficiency, really not bad there either. You get about an average of 35 kpl, depending on how you ride. Design-wise, clearly it looks very similar to the new 390, but there are some differences beyond the paint schemes. For example, this is the same LED headlamp, but you don't get those funky DRL surrounds. Then this panel over at the side is a little different. It doesn't have the extension. In my opinion, it looks more proportionate. This particular bike has a matte white color here, and we noticed that it stains quite easily, so that is something to keep in mind. For the back, you get the same new cast aluminum subframe. That looks really nice, although you won't really notice it in this black color. Right at the back, you have the same overall look as the 390, and like on the 390, if you want to make this look sleeker, you can just remove this panel, and that gives you a slim tail section. Now bear in mind, if you do go over a wet road, you're probably going to cover yourself in filth, but that's the price to pay for style. Features-wise, it's a lot more simple than the 390. You don't get the color TFT display. This is a simpler looking LCD unit. You don't get the cornering traction control, cornering ABS or launch control, but you do get quite a few nice things. This display is Bluetooth enabled. Like I said, the bike has an up and down quick shifter. And if you want, you can deactivate the rear ABS that lets you slide the bike around and have some fun. It really goes with the nature of this bike. Something else that I like is that if you turn off the rear ABS, the bike remembers that and it keeps it turned off even after you've switched off the motorcycle. Overall then, I'm really sold on this new 250 Duke. It packs that signature KTM hooligan nature, but without getting into the level where it could scare you like a 390 could. At 2.4 lakh rupees, it is priced almost the same as the old motorcycle, and it brings you a whole lot more. Now, if you look at what's available in the market for that price, you could get the Triumph Speed 400 or the new Honda CB300R at about 2.4 lakhs as well. Both those bikes will give you a little more performance, but I'd say that this bike has more character, especially if you like a sporty, aggressive bike. If you're someone who dreams about the new 390 Duke, but its 3.1 lakh rupee price is a bit too much, give this bike a try. It might surprise you.